Welcome, good morning. So good to see so many smiling faces and so many friends. I was just circling back through my calendar. This is my 4th year at Convene. So Lisa, I don't know how many years have you been going, but I wanted to say that to start because this year just seems a little different in the conversation. As you just heard Ken bring up, AI is changing everything. So we saw with the Hugging Face breach, right? AI is now the attacker. We also know AI is becoming part of our workforce. And if you look around the room on the edges, AI is in every tool that we're using now to defend. And that certainly presents an exciting opportunity. But I also know from working day to day with many of you that you're still fighting the good fight when it comes to your humans. And so this idea of, okay, AI is coming to the mix is probably like an exciting opportunity, but also could feel daunting. And so we took a step back and said, why are we still having the same conversations? Where's the gap? And what I started to recognize is that despite knowing that this is a big problem, having data and evidence, many programs are still struggling to communicate ROI, benefit, and drive change at the leadership level. And so that's why I brought Edna here. Edna joined Living Security's Executive Advisory Board about 6 to 9 months ago, I think now. But we'd been working together for quite a while before. And as Lisa mentioned, she has a phenomenal background, so I'm gonna have you share that here momentarily. And what I really asked her to do is, come be of service to this room. Come talk about how are we able to better communicate and articulate the mission, the goals, and the benefit and ROI of our program so that we can get leadership to listen and get the support, the resources to be able to drive the programs forward. So, and I'd love for you to give a little bit of your background and maybe one prompting question, when workforce risk comes up, who's in the room at the leadership level? So background first would be great.
Okay, I want to go to the question first. There's no way to do my background shortly. I'm so sorry. This is what happens when you get old. So I'll try to give you a thumbnail. Homicide prosecutor who then went into private practice of law for 20 years. And I'm going to take a drink of water because for some reason I need it. Thank you. And in those 20 years really represented lots of companies in 3 fundamental areas of business. The one that's most important, the money guys, right? None of this works without funding. 2, the inventors and the innovators, primarily in technology. When I say technology, I mean physical technology as well as software. Did I mention that I'm old? And then after that went to one of my clients. So I was the chief security officer for Cisco Systems Global Value Chain. Had about 228,000 third parties that I was responsible for. That was fun. And then thought that I would retire out of Cisco, but was recruited to come over to Microsoft to create a new role, which was the Chief Security and Risk Officer for the cloud. And these days I sit on boards. I still serve the one flag that I will serve until the day I die, and hopefully I may get to serve it even after that, which is the flag of the United States of America. And I'm doing a whole host of things with some think tanks as well. I will disclose to you, I was never a CISO. I've had the privilege of having CISOs report to me, but I don't want to mislead anybody. You would not want me coming to your home and configuring your router. Trust me. Let my husband do that. Okay, so the question is an intriguing one, because we live in a world where, at the end of the day, while I haven't had the privilege of being part of the Secret Service, but I've spent a lot of time with the intelligence community and still do. And I'm always pivoting 360 degrees, digitally and physically. And so who's in the room is not the right people, is the answer. And so what we need in today's day and age is platforms that will enable us to capture input data that looks at the full spectrum of our workforce, both human and non-human, and then extract from that information what we need to go focus on in a risk prioritized way.
Cannot agree more. All right, well, let's dive into the conversation. To note, though, I love that you gave that background. We actually changed the title, right, at the last minute before coming up here, because it did say CISO, but to your point, there are going to be a host of leaders in the room having these conversations that are part of a broader C-suite. So as we kind of move forward, who else could we expect to be a part of the conversation? And as you talk about platform and prioritization, who do we need to arm with that information to be able to successfully engage in coming up with solutions?
Look, none of this is going to come as a shock to any of you. The difficulty is getting everybody in the room. I'm a big fan of, in the old days, we used to call it a war room. There's a warm and fuzzy picture. But operating committees, right? And the one group we always forget is HR. Don't know why, not going to pontificate on that. Our HR colleagues are very important members of our leadership community and need to be at the table, period. We all have the reaction when somebody says you need to have legal in the room, even me, right? They need to be at the table. But here's the one I also see forgotten, is your CFO at the table. Why? Not because I want them there to monitor how much we are spending. I want them there to hear my answer, which is, if I use this platform properly, what am I going to do? I'm going to understand risk better, and I'm going to tell you how much revenue I protected. I'm going to tell you how many people I protected. I'm going to tell you how much innovation and research I protected, and they will stop and listen to that.
Therein lies the gap I think we need to close today. We have 21 minutes to do it, so we're gonna do our best. So if you think about where I set up earlier, right? Everything is changing. The workforce is changing. The speed of attacks are changing. And that's an opportunity for us to then go into that room and say, hey, we are playing on a different playing field. The game has changed. The old tools no longer are effective. And so that makes me think about, traditional security awareness and training. If we're running programs on a quarterly basis, reporting on a quarterly basis, trying to get to those annual metrics, but 22 seconds is the speed of the attacker handoff, how do we actually close and communicate that gap?
Yeah. Look, technology is really cool. For those of us who came up from the day of the dinosaur, I can do things a lot faster. And that's pretty damn exciting. So I think what we need for the first time is something that combines input, so investigation from my perspective, right? Am I investigating, is my intelligence feed coming in real time with regard to my humans and non-humans? So the Hugging Face example was a really good one, right? There was a success story there, they discovered it, right? The reality is this was an unintended escape. However, imagine if it was an intentional escape. So behind that technology was a human. And a combination of human and non-human behavior feeds would give me a lead-in right away. God is my witness, I did not spend last night yelling, although I was with my son and daughter-in-law. I don't know why I'm losing my voice, so I apologize. The reality is that intelligence feed, monitored real time continuously, coming into me and then prioritized, allows me to do something that's really unique. It allows me to do risk prioritization, because we need to look at where the real problem lies. We get inundated with information, right? And paring that down into something that we can work on is something that I think is really meaningful. That's what I think we've needed, and we haven't had the opportunity to have it yet. I think living security is at the forefront of doing that. Am I biased? Damn straight. Did she buy me? Absolutely not. I actually wanted to be part of what she was doing because I like to monitor what's going on, and I think we all need to come together to move the needle for the community at large.
Yeah. You're naming something that is absolutely critical to the start of that communication path, which is visibility. And ultimately, we didn't have visibility before. And so when we think about at a leadership level, what is leadership asking, or what do they need to actually see to make decisions? You noted one thing quite well, right? We need to be able to see a combination of our future workforce acting, in sync or independently. And we need to have those real-time signals to be able to make decisions. But what other conversations are happening in the room today that we should be aware of?
Yeah. So I have chaired boards, but people love to put me on the risk and the audit committee. Go figure. I ask the same questions all the time, which is, what am I seeing? How are you monitoring it? How are you prioritizing it? And tell me, with empirical data to support it, the difference it's making. You can be creative in what that difference can be. It can be I protected revenue. It can be I assured that we kept the customers that we have because the regulatory scheme is constantly changing, and because of what I'm doing and what I found, I can say we're still meeting it. It can also be I closed on XYZ certifications, which are now mandatory. I would love to put certifications in a special bucket. For those of you who have them, God bless you. I have never seen a SOC 2 certified company that doesn't worry about the same damn shit that they were worried about before they got the SOC 2 certification. Just saying. Sorry. This is the privilege of being old.
Yeah, we did forewarn you, but it's also the benefit of having Edna on stage. And so you're telling me that if we keep bringing the same report to the board and saying, look, we checked the box, we got everybody trained. Oh, look, our phishing click rate dropped by 0.5%. Like, there's going to be a gap in the communication. We're not going to get the budget we're looking for.
Yeah, and I think this is the interesting challenge. Is everybody always asks, how do I get funding? The last time I looked, everybody runs on currency. I happen to prefer the US dollar. There's a theme here in case you haven't picked it up. I like the US of A. But if you can walk in and say, here's where I've enabled new business. Here's where I've saved us from downsides. Here's where I actually did, and I've had some examples of this, where we're looking at people and we see aberrational behavior, but it doesn't map to the technology, right? Because I had separate feeds on what the tech was doing than what the people were doing. And so I've been able to figure out, and this is, Ken, you look at the same thing. You look at signals, right? I mean, SIGINT is part of my life. I look at physical, logical, behavioral, operational signals, right, as well as IP. And so when you put all of that together, I can say I have a problem over here in advance. And sometimes the problem has manifested itself. Imagine in a supply chain. I had to be careful because you know where I worked. So let me anonymize this and say, imagine in a supply chain you had somebody who had figured out a way to deal with a whole host of very traditional old-fashioned methodology, shell companies, that led to several family members in a variety of locations. Oh, let's just pick Asia for fun. And they impacted specific types of components that went into the fundamental hardware that makes every single thing that you use work. Okay? Oh, okay. So they're monetarily focused. That's fraud. That's great. We can get them out. There were only 2 of us in the room that day who looked and said, I found that. Now I need to go figure out, because of the region it was in, what was done with those raw material components. Let's go set up a test lab real damn fast. That's something that a platform that brings all of this together can give you. Nobody's thinking about it that way. Does that sound like human risk management to you? Damn straight it is.
I love that. So visibility is key. Then we need to prioritize. But one thing that really stands out in the thread is we need to actually understand what our leadership cares about to start. So if you don't know what's keeping them up at night, if you don't know what incident keeps hitting the SOC, if you're operating in silos without that information, then you're going to be sort of throwing darts trying to figure out what sticks. And so breaking down those silos, having communication across the security team, really getting to the why that matters. And maybe that is a financial objective. Maybe it's adoption of a new technology. Maybe it's not the traditional behavioral risk that we all think about. But if we can align there, we actually know where to look. And so I'm monitoring slides over here as well as we go through. So we'd done this study with a third party called Scientia. And they looked through, a large set of anonymized data and found that it's about 10% of your workforce that drives 73% of your risk. And so that's a great place to start. Is that on the ground? Is that what you found? What are you seeing in terms of being able to hotspot those pockets of risk to successfully prioritize?
Yeah. Look, I'm a data weenie. So I love that you came to 10%. My number has always been a range. And the range has been anywhere from 7 to 12 over the years. And that's because risk moves as new innovation happens. And I found whenever you're getting ready to release a skunk work project into, let's say, a beta, or some people call it, a customer test, I think you will see a risk spike in human behavior. I'm not a psychologist, you can tell that. I don't know exactly why, but I can tell you the data tells you this happens. They're worried about its performance, whatever it is. So, look, I think prioritization is fundamental in life, right? I mean, hell, I'm a logistics person as well. I prioritize my routes when I go food shopping. I kid you not, right? I know which path I'm going to take. Why? Because I figured out risk, I figured out cost, and I figured out time. Those are my 3 relative factors. You need to do that in the same way. Yes, I'm seeing it, but I think we need to recognize that part of the reason why you want that continuous flow of information is it's never static. When you look at something at one point in time, it's a great lens, but it's not the full lens. And you want to know how to test that? Wait till you get to my age, which starts with the number 7, and then go back and look at pictures. I might have changed a little bit.
But and this wasn't rehearsed, but we are actually going to be releasing the next version of that report here shortly with a title called The Moving Target.
Excellent.
And what we found in a follow-up to that report is exactly what you said, is that from last year to this year, that risk cohort has actually changed. And so visibility, prioritization, continuous monitoring, we're starting to get to some solutions now. And so I wanted to get to a few questions that we believe our leadership is being asked. And that talks about, where is the risk? What does it look like now? And is it getting better? Right? That's highest level boardroom conversation. How can you communicate with confidence that we understand what's going on? We're not going to be surprised and it's improving. Are these the questions that the CISO is being asked or the C-suite is being asked? What other things are they needing to be prepared to answer when they come into a boardroom?
I think everybody always starts with how are we doing financially and what is the risk to our growth? And so you need to frame it in that way, right? And then we're being asked, generally, at least I'm asking, and I'm getting others to ask because we're embedding this into NACD processes. How how are you monitoring the risk? And how quickly are you adjusting to the change in risk? And then the real question is, how do you define better? And I'm going to give people grace, because if you've sat in the operating seat, you understand what it means to say, if I ask, are we better? I'm getting your subjective view on what better means, right? In the old days, that meant 87% of my workforce took the security training and passed. Yay. It also meant that I actually found this many vulnerabilities and closed them in this period of time. Here's a different question. Which vulnerabilities are going to impact us the most? Which do we not care about? What did we all do while the US government was deciding whether it was going to fund CISA? And I think Nick Anderson, I don't know if he's in the room yet, is going to be speaking here, a great friend to our country and a good pal of mine, who is currently the acting director of CISA. We didn't have CVEs. And so Europe stood up, I don't know if anybody's aware of this, but Europe stood up its own really quickly CVE list. So now the question is, which one do I look at, right? So a very fundamental question. What are you using to determine whether or not we're better? Tell me your criteria. I'll evaluate them after you give them to me, but tell me what you're using. And then show me how you're moving along that line, right? And when I was an operating executive, I was very mercurial. I looked straight up at Satya and said, hey, I'm going to protect this much of your revenue. Watch me. And the answer I got back was, I don't think so. Did you say with the chief security and risk officer? I don't think so. You have a new security product in your pocket? And I said, all right, give me 8 months. In 8 months, I'm going to come back to you and I'll show you a number. And if the number isn't X billion, fire me. I'm old. I didn't need the job anyway. And I met it, and it went up regularly. So these are the kinds of, I want to encourage people to say, when you walk into that room and you're looking at the directors, and God help you if you are leader, whomever they are, or your leader's leader, or your CEO says, I want to check the board deck. Has anybody ever done a piece that contributed to a board deck that somebody hasn't said, I have to check it first? Damn it, we are not the enemy, okay? Don't hide things from us. Go in with confidence, go in with your data, and also befriend a director or two if you are permitted to. I wheedle through the C-suite at any company whose board I serve on, as Ashley knows. So I think the answer is that's very important for you to bring to the table. But the questions are the right questions. It's how you couch them.
It's also, yeah, and it's also, it requires an understanding of your business operations, because you're not going to be able to say this risk matters or this one doesn't, or this is more acceptable here than it was at my last job, unless you know how the company makes money, what they're concerned about, what those risks actually are. And so this is why this conversation is so important. I think, we have different levels of individuals in this room, from, practitioner up to CISO and C-suite, and probably board directors as well. And it behooves all of us to start understanding that, I think, from an early phase, so we can align our programs more directly with that impact. So I think those are great points that you've made there. So we have some on the slides. We have some examples. I think you started going into them. If you read, one of the columns, you have sort of weak answers to questions. And I think that is where most of the room is actually living today. So where is the risk? Well, everyone took my training, as you said. Are we getting better? Well, we got more stars and thumbs ups on the last training course that we said. So I would say that most of the platforms and programs structurally have not been designed to actually give you a tool to enable the effective conversation. And that can be a huge struggle. So, I invite the room to kind of take a picture of this slide and ask yourself, do I have the right program, the material, the mechanism to be able to get to those the answers to the questions that Edna just described. All right, so where does this get difficult? Outside of tooling, maybe not having proper tooling, where else will we see some of this room struggle?
I think you'll struggle in a couple places. One is, remember that HR person I said you really want to have at the table? You want them there because they're, despite popular belief, they are there to protect the company. They actually do care about, quite frankly, the lifeblood of any organization, whether it's a government, a nonprofit, or a for-profit business, and that's the humans. And so thinking about privacy, one. The other thing I've also gotten is you're going to single out the people who are doing certain things and stigmatize them. No, we're not if we're doing it right. And the beauty of getting constant intelligence feeds is that enables us now to say, I'm seeing this trend, right? And if you need to go have a conversation with that woman named Edna Conway, who seems to be doing aberrational things under an alter ego on a phone that's somehow connected to the company just to test things, then you go have that private conversation. But having a conversation about trends is something that I think can change the conversation that's needed when you get everybody's fearful of it. Are you going to single me out? Am I going to look different? What if I don't know? What if I did something by accident, right? So that's a really hard dynamic because I really like technology, data, and numbers, and humans are too bloody complicated because they have feelings. And that's something we need to be respectful of.
But you mentioned HR quite a fefew times, and I've come to believe that when you're trying to gain cross-business alignment, whether it's HR or the head of finance or accounting or whoever, the one thing that we can all actually relate to because we engage with them day to day is our humans. And so very messy, but also relatable, and it gives us a common language to start saying, hey, we know that you engage with this team member day to day. We see that there's risk in this area of our business. This function is driving more risk. Can you help us to understand why? Is it a process issue? Do you not have proper tooling and technology in place that are allowing people to make the right decision more consistently? Is it actually the environment that's creating the risk more than it is the actual human beings themselves? And so I think starting at that sort of common thread of the team, things that they interact with and control, that they care about as a manager, is also a great foundation to build from, despite the messiness. I
think that's right. I mean, we have. I'm the only thing I can see.
Yes, we want to have some time for Q&A as well. So.
Good luck with that. The intelligence feeds are fantastic because what they allow you to do is avoid the one question you don't ever want when you're talking to somebody. I don't care if it's your boss, your colleague, the board. I just saw this in the news. What are we doing about it? If you're reactive to that, you've already failed. So I think that's another thing that you need to be aware of and actually leverage the intelligence feed aspect of the continuous monitoring in the platform. Sorry, I took up all the time.
But even better to say, I saw this in the news, let me show you how we already have programs in place so that we are not the next victim, right?
Dead on.
I think we can probably wrap up here for some questions. You talked about signals, that's great. So there's just a few takeaways here. I think you guys can snap, pictures of all of this, but I'd love to pause and see. I know, Edna, you enjoy a little interactivity and Q&A. So I'll open up to the audience. You have a board member, former executive at Cisco and Microsoft. So ask her, how can I effectively communicate my program's needs, the great work we're doing? How do I gain more budget? How do we align better to the business? All of those questions that you've held with you and have struggled to get answers. Edna's here for the next few minutes, but the rest of the day as well. So Edna, thanks for sharing your perspective with us.
My privilege. Ashley always tries to shows me slides and I go rogue. So. Lisa,
it's better that way.
Do we have time to do this? Okay.
I would encourage everybody to come back to the booth if they want to see you as well.
Okay. They're good. I scared them all.
Oh, right here.
One right here. Brian.
Thank you. My name is Austin Segalko from the Students Institute. We spoke a lot about risk and budget. I was in Black Hat last week, and this continuously comes up year after year. The risk is growing exponentially, budget stays stable. Technology is growing exponentially, budget stays stable. Gentlemen were so previously saying, hey, AI is continuously growing. We don't necessarily know what's going on with these next frontier models. Let's begin to develop best practices for organizations to make sure we can stay ahead of it. But I don't necessarily know how to bring the thumb drive to, hey, I'm going to arrest the AI model. You know, with the EU CRA that was mandated last year that's coming out in the near future, with Nick's work, it says CISA specifically for DOD 2604 for vulnerability management, with the Trump administration's Gold Eagle initiative for the clearinghouse for software vulnerabilities, and then the Linux Foundation coming forth with the Crazy initiative. Let's talk through what's going on with those class models, dating back to April 6th earlier this year. Prior to that, in the CISO level, time and time again, software vulnerability management has come up saying, hey, this is the utmost importance. And I understand budget not only within the CISO level for software vulnerabilities have been there time and time again, it's now getting really up to the boardroom. Is it going to need to be another Mythos class model scare in terms of readiness in order to get these conversations going in the near future? Or how do we begin to make sure that the budget continues to go up and not have a circumstance like April 6th earlier this year?
Yeah. Thank you for that. I believe the answer is, I hope, not another scare. Although, you know, anybody in this space always remembers, you know, never waste a good incident, right? But that's really not the direction we want to go. I think there's two areas that will help with that. One, I recently got appointed to the U.S. Information Security and Privacy Advisory Board, and I'm trying to bring some of these issues to the table to pull together the largest enterprise, short of China, which is the U.S. government, and think about this because we can be a test ground. The second place I think that will help us is I'm talking to two of, as you know, cyber is about 86% of cyber insurance actually goes to reinsurance. So if you think about Munich Re or Swiss Re, who cover most of that, I think the insurers are coming to the table and will demand some form of focus on what the best practices are, how you're doing it, proof of how you're doing it, and financial capability to actually continue to implement it before they'll issue the insurance. So I think those two leading areas are going to take us there. It's my hope anyway. It's the best answer I can give you.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
I'd also wonder, and I know maybe we can speak to this afterwards, like, can we get creative at repurposing budget that we already have, right? We always talk about how do we grow the budget, and the revenue is obviously the constraint, right? The operational budget for companies. But is there an area with AI and with automation that actually gets cheaper for us to actually patch and find some of these vulnerabilities, and then we can have our humans really focused on like the next level threat? And so I think I would encourage all of us, especially as we're thinking about like our program area of coverage, look across and say, where can AI also help drive efficiency, where we can start repurposing budget and then, you know, use the additional human headcount to drive more growth. So.
Okay. Graciousness in action. See, there's no hook, there's just Lisa graciously leaning over.
Thanks, Lisa.